crap table, the guys were artists at changing the dice, you know. They'd pick them out with a rake and then throw them back to the guy and give him a set of dice that would shoot 11 the first time out, and then he'd change them so he crap every time.
The roots of the gambling that flourished in the early 20th century in America go back to America's infancy. Many of the men who grace our currency today were known gamblers, including Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson, who killed a man in a duel over a gambling debt. By the 1830s, card games like Faro became popular with outlaws. Many gambling towns were evolving into resort destinations for wealthy vacationers.
Saratoga, well, the town started way back, you know, during the Revolution. I mean, it was a big battle there. And then it's when they discovered the hot springs, it became a vacation area.
High society went there, everybody knew it, but they were not legal.
Even United States Senator John Old Smoke Morrissey saw opportunity in Saratoga and opened several casinos which he owned at the same time he served in Congress.
It was a very elegant place, and the wealthiest went there. All the generals from the Civil War, the Vanderbilts. It was a very upscale place.
On the other side of the country, towns like Reno and Virginia City prospered with Gold Rush 49ers. San Francisco had the fanciest clubs of all, with the famous El Dorado being one of the first. It is said that by 1850, the city had 1,000 legal gambling houses and a population of just 25,000.
Folks would come in from the hills and would actually bet gold dust or a little nuggets as well as cash.
In the 1860s, the California legislature made gambling illegal, but that didn't mean people stopped gambling. It just went underground.
The model for the type of casinos that emerged in Las Vegas were those that were developed in San Francisco during the gold rush, where you had entertainment, you had music, you had pretty girls, you had lots of noise, and you gambled around the clock. That became the prototype.
Many gamblers started their careers when they were very young. This was the case for Russian immigrants Charlie and Emil Resnik, who learned early that hustling was good for fun and profit.
When my uncle and father were kids selling newspapers in New York, and amongst other things, they had crap games, nickel crap games. I mean, they started when they were 9, 10 years old.
Eventually, after running illegal clubs in Detroit, the Resnik brothers would be vested owners in at least 6 legal casino resorts in Nevada, including the old El Rancho in Las Vegas, as well as the Cal Neva and Biltmore on Lake Tahoe. By 1920, with the passing of the controversial 18th Amendment, which began prohibition, men intent on making their fortunes in America found a liquid way to riches.
One uncle became a big whale with the Cleveland Syndicate. They used to run whiskey on trucks, and he was a machine gunner on the back.
Waterways close to U.S. borders became heavy with rum-running boats carting liquor into the country. The ports around Galveston, Texas were no exception. Galveston, popular with seamen, had long since developed a reputation for after-hours fun and, of course, games.
The 20s mostly is when, after World War I, is when it really exploded into a gambling mecca of sorts.
Native Dick Richards Sr. was knee-deep in illegal activity in Galveston and making a fortune during Prohibition.
And he showed me 4-story building that he owned in downtown Houston at one time. Had a fleet of bulletproof Hudsons, an airplane, a ship, or a large boat that went up and down the Houston Channel with the illegal booze, but he also ran gambling.
The transition from run-running to gambling hall was an easy one. Besides, everyone knew Prohibition wouldn't last forever.
And so many of these bootleggers became very expert after 1933 in operating gambling operations in Detroit, Cleveland, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, etc.
There was a little electric sign above the door. It said Dick's Lamplighter Club. Texas was a dry state, so he was breaking the law 24 hours a day just by serving liquor. He didn't even have to gamble to break the law. It was relatively small. It had just enough room for a bar that I think probably sat about 10 people. There was room for a poker table, a regulation poker table, and a 21 game that was sat in the corner.
And while Richards ran his modest lamplighter club, other places in the area, like the Hollywood Dinner Club, owned by the Maceo brothers, were much fancier joints.
They were the leaders, the friendly godfathers, I would say, because they weren't like most gangsters, or they weren't at all gangsters. They weren't like most of the mafia. They were very giving. They gave a lot to the community. Their Hollywood Dinner Club was the first club air-conditioned, and it was a very posh place. And then, of course, their crowning achievement, the Balinese Room.
It was built on a pier over the water, so in order to get into the casino, you had to go through several doors, steel doors, then walk about 100 yards over the ocean. I think they had kind of a canvas cover over that area before you got to the casino. And inside the casino, they'd have like a 15-piece orchestra. When the Texas Rangers would come through the front door, the orchestra band leader was told to strike up the Eyes of Texas. And when they did this, all the patriotic Texan would stand up and start singing along with it, which would block the entrance to the back room. In order to get there, the Texas Rangers had to come through the front door. They would run and have to run all the way down this long hallway. And of course, there was no other way to get there. You couldn't go, there was no back door. It was, the Gulf of Mexico.
Thanks to widespread political corruption in Galveston and the almost complete control of the Maceo family, the casinos ran very smoothly for a long time. And since the only way on or off the island was by ferry or a causeway bridge, casino owners set up a system.
The local police would have a patrol car or a plainclothes car on that bridge. When they saw the Texas Rangers coming, they would radio ahead, and then everybody would close up with the exception of one or two clubs, and they would take turns doing that so that there would be somebody to raid.
Meanwhile, about 300 miles and a world away from Galveston, a young entrepreneur had opened his first joint in Fort Worth.
The year of 1930, I was 18 years old, and I ran a little gambling house. Me and two other guys. We rented a little corner building off from a cafe in Fort Worth, Texas, and we ran gambling there.
Having been born to sharecropper parents, Willie Robertson went against all the odds. At 17 years old, he left home with only $1.35 in his pocket, and within months started running his little gambling house, the Hole in the Wall.
I told my dad I knew it was a better living somewhere in the world than what we were doing.
From the start, Willie enticed people with the same thing some modern casinos still use: free food. The club probably had one of the first free buffets for gamblers, with Willie himself home cooking dinner every night for his patrons. His clientele was the working class of Fort Worth.
Cab drivers, garbage people, and people who were domestic workers. Fort Worth was a fair prejudice at that time, so we had our own little cab stands, our own little gambling houses, our own little nightclubs all to ourselves. But the gambling houses, they didn't want us to play. They raided my little joint so much I couldn't do anything. I didn't have no job, and I couldn't get one. There just wasn't any jobs around. See, 29, 30, 31, pressure. That's when I had this chance to come to California. I took it.
Over the next few years, Robertson owned and operated many gambling joints up and down the Pacific coast. He later opened the Chickadee Club in Las Vegas and became the first African-American pit boss in the country at the famous Moulin Rouge. The struggles of the Great Depression drove many toward, rather than away from, a life of gambling. With Prohibition and the Depression in full swing, the climate was ideal for gambling houses, where gin mixed with the temptation of a good roll of the dice, both serving as a distraction from the awful reality outside.
Prohibition was just an absolutely wonderful thing for criminal elements.
During this time, Sam Smith was in Houston and running a joint that catered to a slightly more affluent clientele than Robertson. His daughter remembers.
Well, the Depression War was in 1929 when they were in Houston, and they really made a lot of money then. During the Depression, everybody else was broke, and we weren't. And I didn't think that was strange, but everybody was gambling, trying to make money, so we were all doing very well during the Depression.
Inez Rambo essentially grew up in a casino.
I thought everybody